This was my 21k time trial just 2 years ago, 1 hour 38 minutes, which is 4:42 per k. Earlier this year, I surprised myself and ran a 1 hour 18 half marathon, which is 3:41 per k. So in this video, I want to share my own experience from an amateur's perspective. I'll try to squeeze in as much as I can my own strategies and my thought process about running in this short YouTube video. And if you still want to dive deeper into my entire strategy, I've created a full 1.5 hour course about it, link below. Consider that if you've been struggling to get a breakthrough in running, like I did for the past 10 years since high school. Let's dive right into the strategy. The first idea about fitness isn't entirely about how long you have been running. I found that it really depends more on your most recent workouts. You could have been running consistently for many years like me and not really seeing significant results. So if you're looking for a breakthrough performance, that literally suggests that you need to do your lifetime best mileage and lifetime best workouts. So the question is, how do we achieve our lifetime best mileage and workouts? So my second strategy is to just split the mileage and intervals into separate blocks. For example, in the training plans I'm selling, I alternate between a mileage week and an interval week. Firstly, that's because we don't really lose fitness that quickly, especially not after a week. And I learned this from the goat of running coaching, Jack Daniels. In fact, you don't really lose that much fitness after 2 weeks even. Because balancing both mileage and intervals in the same week is a tricky juggle to handle. If you go too hard for your intervals, your mileage will suffer. Conversely, if you fatigue yourself too much from your mileage, your intervals will suffer. And that's probably why I haven't seen significant results after so long. And also, if you try to increase both volume and intensity at the same time, it's also another risk of injury. So consider just doing a mileage block and then an interval block on another week, so you can focus entirely on mileage on 1 week, and that really allows you to push your mileage and fully recover and run your intervals on fresh legs the next week. One of the best mileage blocks I did last year was 160k in 6 days. And even though I don't do that so often because I'm training for triathlons, my run fitness has never really been the same since. Obviously, I didn't start at 160k. I think you know your body the best and what you can do, so start wherever you're at and progressively increase the mileage. By the way, I've also learned that you cannot just do many short runs just to increase the mileage. Because I've always done like 10 to 20k in a single run, I found that I still struggle doing a 2-hour run, even though my weekly mileage can be high. So I learned that the distance of your single run also matters as well. And that's why I will focus on for beginners. Just aim to increase the distance of a single run first to at least an hour before thinking about weekly mileage. And for half marathon specifically, I will gradually build up my long runs to high 20k's or even reaching 30k's. It's definitely gonna be an over distance run, more than 21k. But at what effort or zone should we be running our mileage runs at? If you've been watching my channel, you know that I've been trying to increase my zone 2 pace as much as possible. But whether zone 2 training is overhyped or not, it really doesn't matter. What you're really trying to train is your lactate threshold 1. It's exactly the same idea as zone 4 threshold training. The aim is to move the point at which your lactate starts to spike to a faster pace. Basically, zone 2 is also just threshold training at a different lactate threshold. But on top of just increasing your LT1, a long run at zone 2 also has other benefits. The second benefit is also muscular resistance to the long effort. And thirdly is of course aerobic benefits, which means building more mitochondria in your cells. That occurs at any zones, including the higher and lower zones, and not just zone 2. But of course, the faster you go, you can't run as long. So for most amateur runners like me, you're busy with other things in life, you want to get the most value out of your running hours, so that is going to be a long run at zone 2. I recently just watched Tadej Pogacar's old coach Sam Milan in an interview. He says that zone 2 is really within a 5 to 10 beats per minute heart rate zone. That suggests to me that he is actually referring to zone 2 as just the start and end point of where the blood lactate starts to rise. Basically just the lactate inflection point itself, and not just blurred lines in the sand as what Lionel Sanders mentioned. By the way, this is also new to me as well. In terms of running pace, that's maybe like a 10 to 20 second per kilometer window where your zone 2 sits. Of course, we'll never know exactly where our zone 2 sits without a lactate meter, so this is my own personal way of thinking about zone 2. You can take a screenshot of these pointers if you want. Number 1, you're not actively thinking about pushing. My athlete calls it a no thinking pace. Number 2 is gonna be around 75% of your max HR. Use that as a ballpark figure because everyone's heart rate is different. And we know for beginners, it's gonna be a higher heart rate. And even for pros, it doesn't go down that much. The goat of cycling, Tadej Pogacar, mentioned that his zone 2 heart rate is between 150 to 155 beats per minute.
Around 150 to 155.
So a zone 2 of 140 to 160 is entirely possible. For myself, I don't really rely on heart rate so much. Of course, if you're just running 1 beat per minute higher than your calculated zone number, that does not necessarily mean you're running a zone 3. Number 3 is the breathing and conversational test. You're supposed to form complete sentences with a puff at the end, so not an entirely breathless run. And if you're in zone 3, you still can talk, but you don't really want to talk. I find that when I run in zone 2, you still feel like you want to talk and have a conversation. Number 4, you can totally check this by stop breathing through your mouth and only breathing through your nose. Number 5 is to check with the online VDOT calculator. This is made by the GOAT of run coaching, Jack Daniels. You can put a recent time trial or race into the calculator to quite accurately find out what your zones are. So for my recent 34.5 minute 10k, that's giving me an easy pace of 4:19 and above. Personally, I find that this is quite spot on for me. I can totally nose breathe at this pace. And within this range, I personally prefer running at the faster end of this range, and sometimes I deliberately run faster at low zone 3 as well. And this strategy helped improve my zone 2 from not more than 5 minutes per k last year to about 4:20-ish now at the same heart rate. I think I spent a little bit too much time talking about zone 2. Let's quickly go into zone 3, 4 and 5. They all have their place in their training plan, especially zone 3. People like to call that the grey zone and we should avoid that. But I'll just say I've jumped from a 39 minute to a 36 minute 10k just 1 week after I did a hard 21k at zone 3. I guess that zone 3 run was the key element that was missing in my fitness that helped me just jump to a faster 10k. Zone 3 training is especially important for a half marathon because the logic is how can you race hard if the longest workout in training you do above zone 2 is maybe only 45 minutes at threshold. Now, how long should you train at zone 3? We know that VO2 max is around our 10 to 12 minute full gas effort, and we know our zone 4 threshold is about an hour of max effort. So for zone 3, since it's an easier zone, ideally we should be at least doing 1 hour of effort during training if we want to move the needle, because we already do our zone 4 threshold training around 40-45 minutes, right? It's the same logic for the other zones as well. If we're going at a harder zone, we can't go as far, and if we're going easier like a zone 2 effort, we probably should go longer. I'm not saying there's absolutely no benefit if you're doing like a half an hour zone 2 effort, but it's not gonna push you, right? And that's why I personally believe that there are minimum durations to train at each zone. I'll aim for at least 15 minutes if I'm training at VO2 max, 40 to 45 minutes if I'm at threshold, and I believe more is better. We see Alex Yee, the Olympic triathlon champion, doing 55 minutes of threshold on the bike, and we also see Christian Blumenfeld doing 1 hour at threshold broken up into intervals. I will also aim for at least 1 hour at zone 3 and 1.5 hours if I'm running at zone 2. Again, as a beginner, you might not last 1.5 hours off the gate. Build it up progressively from where you are. For half marathon training specifically, I'll aim to do at least 21k of zone 3 even if I take breaks. For most people, the half marathon is raced in zone 3 and closer to zone 4 for really elite runners. So if you want to improve your zone 3, guess what training you gotta do? Zone 4 training, commonly referred to as threshold training, which is also called LT2, the second point at which your lactate threshold starts to rise exponentially. And since we know that LT2 pace is about an all-out 1 hour effort, we gotta at least be doing 40 to 45 minutes in training if you want to move the needle. From experience, 30 minutes also kind of works, but that's also how long people are doing their VO2 max training. You could break this 40 to 45 minutes as intervals, or you could do a straight 40-minute effort, which I prefer, because doing a 40-minute straight effort helps you get used to running hard for a long time without breaks. And secondly, more importantly, it prevents you from going too hard at the start, especially if you do intervals. A very popular threshold workout is 5 times 2k, especially if your threshold is within 4 to 4:30 per k, because you get a total of 40 to 45 minutes of total duration at threshold, which is what we are aiming for. Okay, we know that we can only push our threshold to as much as 80 to 85% of our VO2 max. So what this suggests that if you find your threshold training is stagnating, even though you're spending 40 to 45 minutes at the correct threshold pace, one possible reason is that your threshold is already very close to your VO2 max pace and your threshold is maxed out. Now, in order to improve your threshold further, your VO2 max pace first has to go up so that your threshold has room to grow. A very popular VO2 max workout is 800 to 1k repeats, maybe 5 or 6 times depending on your level. I would aim to do a minimum of 15 minutes at VO2 max, so just adjust the reps and distance based on your pace. Again, you can get a pretty good estimate of your VO2 max from the online calculator. But for my own strategy, for whatever reps or interval distance you choose, just stick to it for a few months and don't change the reps, distance or rest times at all. Because in terms of workout progression, I personally rather increase the pace than changing the reps, interval distance and rest times. And the biggest reason why I prefer just increasing the pace is because if you're actually faster, you want to be training at the new speed, and this is the only way we can train at faster and faster speeds, because decreasing the rest time, increasing the repetitions or distance inhibits you from training at the new speed. Wow, this has already been a long video, but one important point that I want to add is just because you're training for a longer race doesn't directly mean you just increase your interval distance. For example, Alexi is doing 55 minutes at threshold training for an Olympic triathlon. Now, if he chooses to sign up for a full Ironman, does that mean his threshold workouts double or even quadruples? No, right? Because everyone's threshold is your 1 hour full gas effort, no matter what event you sign up for. You can't possibly be doing a 2-hour threshold in training. Conversely, if you're just doing a short 5k race, a 40-minute zone 2 is doing more than a race distance, but then a threshold workout is already a 40-minute effort. So my own strategy is simply just to train your zones and go longer because you're fitter and not just because you sign up for a longer race. And in terms of your training plan, adjust your workouts according to what you're lacking and of course the zone you'll be racing in. For half marathon, zone 3 and zone 4 workouts become the highest priority, and in your training plan, you probably want to fade out VO2 max and high-end speed workouts towards the race. Thanks for making this far into the video. I've crammed as much as I could from my 1.5 hour course into this video. The course also has my base build taper planning strategy based on the race distance. Kindly consider checking that out if you need a more detailed plan. So far, I have 3 sales. Woo! Catch you guys there. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.